to the value add on Terraform. As by means of introduction, Vincent and I are seasoned infrastructure engineers, and the following is a conversation where we talk about Terraform, CDK, infrastructure as code, and I think it's the best conversation I've ever had about platform teams. It's a bit of a slow burn. I hope you enjoy it, like the video, and I recommend listening to this in a car. You don't need to look at the screen. I did capture an angle of me from the side, which I think is a bit unflattering. So you don't need to watch this. We do try share the screen and browse to the things that we talk about. But essentially, I feel this is a podcast format. You don't need to watch the video, but the video helps. Do please enjoy and comment below. See ya.
Why did I rebuild it? I probably didn't even need to rebuild it. Okay, so the value add on top of Terraform. Last time we talked about a lot of drama around the cloud providers and the way that you manage Terraform state and the resources under management, pricing that's exuberant, and then some drama around some open source projects. And I'm very excited about them because I have my own open source project, which is focused on strongly typed Terraform, right? Um, Originally,
I,
Terraform.
I mean, just to interrupt you, I mean, like Terraform is pretty typed. I mean, you have your strings, you have your default
Yes.
values, you have your
Strings. Strings for enum values.
okay, you have strings. No, you have I'm sure you have integers. I'm sure
No,
you have
no, but the problem is,
you have regex, you have stuff, right?
yeah, so Terraform basically is built on the concept of plugins or providers for clouds and cloud or for SaaS or whatever services, cloud services that give you an API where you can create resources, such as AWS gives you an EC2 API where you can create an EC2 resource, right? And that
Mm-hmm.
was very good and well, 10 years ago, where you just needed to create a VPC, a couple of subnets, an instance, or an auto-scaling group, and the number of knobs and dials that you could configure were not that much. But then you start to having like lifecycle hooks on auto-scaling groups that works with lambdas, and you have SNS topics, and you have a lot of different services and different integration patterns between them, right? The cloud became way more complex. A lot more serverless is now being part of a lot of the tech stack, and Terraform is originally just a config file, and a lot of programmatic features were completely omitted. So they try to keep it dumb. They try to keep it as simple as possible to avoid people shooting themselves in the foot. Most of the time, when you talk to people about using actual programming language for cloud configuration, they say like that is a mistake. Like, what are you doing that requires a programming language? You should stick to the proven
Yeah,
path, and you should stick
like a more declarative style of
yeah, declarative way of doing things. But then
yeah.
they introduce for each, then they introduce list comprehensions, then they introduce local blocks, and then you look at the Terraform AWS community module that has like 45 different variables for input.
Mm.
And like five of them need to be set in a specific way to that trickles down through different local blocks with different tertiary conditionals that
Yeah.
then need to value like that go down
Like
ultimately in one resource configuration, and then you don't even know how those variables
yeah,
interact with each other.
speaking of complexity, I mean, I always thought serverless was a godsend because it's going to uh, simplify deployment of of application code, simplify the life cycle, simplify everything to do with that sort of stuff. But for some reason, in Terraform at least, provisioning a Lambda is just a nightmarish. I
Absolutely
I wonder
nightmare.
why. Like, why is that? How come Terraform never managed to make
It's
Lambda
because
provisioning simple?
because Terraform's provider is built on the bare minimum resources to cover the API. So you go into very granular level to set up a Lambda, you must configure the Lambda permission resource. You must configure the IAM role. You must couple it and bind it to the Lambda
So
correctly.
there was no good abstraction or something.
So the abstraction in Terraform is a Terraform module, which is very limited in the way that you can configure it. It provides a fat set of variable inputs, and it provides some outputs. And there's no guarantee around the type system of the output at all. Like the outputs are any. They can be maps, they can be lists, they can be strings. They change if you depending on the internal of the module. If you decide to put a count inside the resource and then you use those outputs or those attributes in an output, then suddenly those outputs become a list. And for some reason, because under the hood something changed, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
that's
mean,
inherent to how Terraform
actually,
modules are designed.
I mean, my usage of serverless is generally quite what do you call it? Standardized. You
Mhm.
know, I usually just run a Go binary, but I guess that's the trouble with the serverless is that
No,
you can do a lot with serverless. You can integrate it in lots of different ways, right?
well, so the great thing about serverless is that you you're able to configure very expressive business logic across cloud resources. But that's also immediately why it becomes so complex, right? Because now your business logic is spread across your serverless components. And if you work with something like Terraform, those components are very low level resources that all need to be configured exactly right for
Well,
your actual business logic to work.
I mean,
Just think
when I
about like a simple Lambda chaining setup
yeah,
where you
yeah,
have
but
one
like
Lambda. Yeah.
yeah, I want to definitely get away from that because my usage of serverless and is to essentially run my monolithic application. Like for me, serverless is like a way better ECS. But of
Yeah.
course, that doesn't work. I guess that is the crux of the problem with Lambda, because yeah, you can get chaining, you can get distributed systems, you can get microservices, you can get all sorts of things with Lambda, and then of course the complexity explodes.
That's right. And the complexity explodes not only just because of how your business logic gets like trickled down across all of your cloud resources, but also because of how these cloud resources are spread across different services of the cloud provider. For example, in AWS, you have a CloudWatch service, you have a where you define your logging groups, and then your permissions of your Lambda must be configured to write to those logging groups. So that's an integration between two
Mm,
different services. You have your
mm,
S3 bucket where you have to have your Lambda notification settings done, or you use
mm,
EventBridge where you have to have like EventBridge rules that then need to
mm.
be capturing the right event fields that you want to propagate towards the Lambdas. So the main problem is the integration across the different services and how to bind them together. And
Yeah,
that's where AWS
but
CDK does like solves it really well.
but Lambda and CloudWatch should be what do you call it? A fixed pattern or something like that. You
It
know what I
changes a
mean?
lot, and it's funny because sometimes it could be very simple. Like you have a situation where you want a Lambda to be triggered on an event bridge rule, and you can simply go to the Lambda and say async config, and then say on success, and then it will, trigger another Lambda or something else, right? And if you do a very simple like Lambda chaining, and you can do that directly on the Lambda resource, it works until you have a use case, and that's a very fixed pattern. But then you have a use case where now, when the Lambda success happens, you want to extract some field from the success event. Like you need to get the actual, I don't know, result field from the JSON of that success event, and you want to extract the payload, like extract a certain payload.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you can't do that with async evoke. That's not possible with the way that the Lambda API works, and you must use event bridge rules. So your very simple pattern of like integrating two things together,
Mm.
which should always be the same thing, no longer works because now you have an event bridge rules that like messes up your whole like situation because you need to parse the payload of the event and get out one field. And that's an example that I learned because I wrote a library to implement these integration patterns from AWS CDK on top of Terraform. And so I saw that like this is an integration test actually that they have on their Lambda function integration
Okay,
setup.
okay.
Yeah, I
So,
can show you
okay.
the actual running code for that.
Okay, so you're just showing some Lambda REST API. That's actually quite interesting because we, we we use that a lot at work.
Yeah,
Um,
so that's where the reality of the cloud today is that people are using these type of patterns more and more. And that's also because you want to, leverage the cloud to accelerate your business feature delivery. So you can't be like completely decoupled from the cloud. You start to be really ingrained and integrated with the cloud features. Even though a lot of original cloud adoption was like, we want to be cloud agnostic, Kubernetes is great. The reality is Even if you use Kubernetes, you're gonna have a whole bunch of custom resources just for AWS to use
Yeah.
to integrate with the
Like
cloud that you're on.
at work, we love to use the Lambda REST API because it integrates with IAM, and then IAM is the way that we mediate, govern different APIs between different teams and stuff.
And a lot of the things in AWS is like the benefits is that tight integration between services, right? Because like you just said, IAM is a really nice way to control permissions across all of our resources. And so yeah, but I pulled this up because this is kind of a nice example, and this is a great example from originally when they released the AWS CDK workshop, in how it simplifies. Like, try to imagine how you would do this with Terraform modules. You're
Oh
creating a
yeah.
function,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And you're specifying here is something very special already, which is the from asset. So this is
Mm.
actually gonna this is a whole asset pipeline built in right in there. It's going
Yeah.
to take care of bundling the code, putting it in S3, making sure that the Lambda can pick it up, or you can,
Yeah.
directly put the code in line. That's something that you cannot imagine how to build this with Terraform modules, right? I mean, I know that there's an attempt, serverless.tf, to do this, but I mean, it's just a mistake, and I'm sorry because I know the people behind this, and I try to explain that, but they
Yeah.
have, this their projects at Pet. So anyway, yeah. So this one line already is an asset pipeline, and then this one right here, the Lambda REST API, is a special REST API. So this is object-oriented programming, and it's like an extension. It's just not a REST API. It's a Lambda REST API that understands the concept of a handler that is backed by a function. So this handler must implement the iFunction interface, and then it knows
Mm.
how to bind and automatically create the API gateway integration and
Yeah.
backend handler call, right?
Yeah.
So just these lines already. Um,
And you get all the LSP, what do you call it? Checking to
exactly.
make sure that everything's there.
So because this is an actual programming language with enums and TypeScript is specifically built to add typing on top of a non-type language like JavaScript. So it has a lot of functionality to inspect the type schema and to really be strong around your typing. So you do get like indeed like the from asset and the
Okay.
handler with the iFunction, and it's
Okay.
strongly typed, right?
Okay. So I think I know where you're going with this. So you're not talking just about primitive typing. You're talking about like function typing and such and so forth. I'm not sure if that's the right terminology.
I'm also not sure about the terminology, but what I'm trying to say is that if you have the Terraform provider, you're going to have a string. You say it's very strongly typed, but
No. Yeah.
string has only like three possible values. And when
Yeah.
I'm building my library, I'm actually have to go to the EC2 or the Lambda, API docs to figure out what are the valid values because that's nowhere in
Mm.
Terraform, right?
Mm.
And they can't really because they need to cover so many AWS services. It's manually written as well. And I'm
Mm.
still relying on the Terraform provider AWS, except I'm building the CDK library on top of it. So this is the example from AWS CDK, but now it's running on top of Terraform, right? So I have the same things. I have the code, the Lambda function, the Lambda REST API. For some reason, I didn't call it function. I called it Lambda function, and that's because I put everything under one namespace. I put it all under AWS Compute, which maybe was a mistake, but okay. And then I have the AWS asset, like the stack, the AWS stack, which is a extension of the classic Terraform stack. This is a stack that understands about AWS asset pipelines. So it knows about ECR, it knows about S3, so it knows that if you use, and that's necessary because when you use AWS CDK, it's built on top of AWS, it's built on top of CloudFormation, so it
Mm.
has the idea of asset pipeline and things like that. So if I want to do this code from asset here, I actually am building, if I synthesize this, I actually have the S3 bucket. If I don't pass in the bucket to the stack, it will create a bucket for me and will automatically upload my Lambda source code bundled up and put it straight into my S3 bucket. Now, some people, when you are doing Terraform, they'd be like, nah, your code delivery must be decoupled, right? On one side, Terraform stands up the skeleton, and on the other side, you have your actual code that needs to be built and deployed. But when you're in the serverless world, the
Mm.
resources and your actual business logic are very tightly coupled,
That's
right?
so true. That's so true. So I think the next question in my brain was like, okay, you create a bucket for the for the sourcing your application code. But like, what happens when you destroy that? Will the bucket go? Uh, or
Yes.
or do you
So
have
this is
a
then
because
pure Terraform
usually
under the hood, right?
because
There is, yeah, the
let me
Terraform call, because the bucket is, the object is also managed by Terraform. So Terraform will first delete the object, then if the then it will delete the bucket. AWS will
well
prevent that. If there's still some objects inside, then it
which
will not
is
allow it. Mhm.
okay. So you're saying that Terraform will completely handle all the objects inside there, I suppose.
Yeah,
Um,
so this is purely translating the AWS CDK on a deep, deep level
mm,
directly to Terraform resources, and not just any resources, but the actual Terraform provider AWS resources. That
okay,
means that all of your existing like Terraform linting, code scanning, everything still works.
cool. And then another question because
Don't care.
CDK I believe has this bootstrap functionality where it does create its own bucket for the stack. I bel
Right.
So
Yeah, so
do
I
you
don't do
don't use
that.
that one?
No, my AWS stack has like it's called like a singleton pattern. It will create an S3 bucket if it's necessary. You can pass it in directly to the AWS stack as well. So when you invoke this, like my CDK workshop stack, when I call the constructor, if I in the constructor properties pass in my own bucket, then it will take that one, right? This is again
Okay,
the
okay,
power of
okay.
actual, you know, I mean, a lot of people hate on object-oriented programming, but the ability to define, like, to use the basic object of a Terraform stack and then extend it with functionality, just reuse the constructor and have this capabilities built in, makes it so much nicer. Like, you can't really do that with Terraform modules or like bundling Terraform modules on top of each other, right?
Right, right. But like, okay, so if you have the option to use the CDK bootstrap, you didn't, that's obviously just not a default here. Like by default,
Yeah,
you
no,
need
the
to.
CDK Bootstrap does a lot, and the actual asset pipeline from AWS CDK is built into the CDK CLI. So it's not a CloudFormation thing. The AWS CDK CLI has the idea of bundling code and putting it into a staging directory and then preparing a manifest of what is inside the staging directory that needs to go into S3, what needs to go into ECR. So that's what the CLI does. Terraform
Okay,
kind of like worked around that by providing special provider functions. So it doesn't like Terraform doesn't understand or doesn't care about AWS asset pipeline, right? But you do have the ability to create like use a Terraform provider to create an S3 bucket and upload an S3 object. So I'm kind of offloading that asset pipeline to
okay,
native Terraform provider capabilities, which
okay.
I'm not sure if it's the best way, but it does allow me to like hand off the lifecycle completely to Terraform the way that it
Interesting.
does. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are all
Wow.
conscious decisions as
These
well.
are there's a lot of details in here too. So say a company's using CDK,
Mhm.
but let's be honest, I think we talked about this before. CDK got there is great, but it's only 80% of the way there. Like it and correct me if I'm wrong, like the support from CDK on the AWS side seems a bit weak, right? At the moment, or do you think they'll come back into it or like what
So that's
like
interesting to hear.
I'm trying to like map the future of CDK
For me,
because
CDK
I'm
is a
looking at Terra.
pivotal tool for or developer tooling for AWS. To hear that I know that they've withdrawn some of the stuff, but they are still actively developing it. Like they added the CDK refactoring for refactoring stacks across was integrated directly. I mean, the CloudFormation refactoring feature was integrated completely into the CDK, so you can refactor stacks now through the CDK CLI. They added an API or like a programmatic way to call the AWS CDK as well. So
What
they
is
are
what
developing
is
and adding more features.
okay? So what is sorry? What does refactoring actually mean in CDK?
Yeah, so in the world of Terraform or in the world of infrastructure as code, the moment you start treating your AWS resources as code, you must be able to do things that are, very common with code. And I can give you an example. You may start with one project and you create a network and you create a database and you create a cluster or you create something like that, and then you deploy your web application. You're running a whole Kubernetes cluster for your blog, right? I'm just
Nice.
kidding. But then you decide that you need to start a second project, and you don't want project two to completely depend on all of the resources that belong to project one, right? Because one day maybe you want to deprecate project one and you want to get rid of it, and then project two depends on half of the resources. So at that point, you must moved or shared resources, maybe to a shared layer or a shared ownership. So maybe there becomes a platform team to maintain the network and the Kubernetes cluster, and then you have the different product teams that deploy on top of it and integrate within it. So you
Uh,
asked me what refactoring was, right? And
yeah.
I just said that I think refactoring is a very central part of
Okay.
infrastructure as code.
I got that. So, okay. For some reason I think we were talking about it a couple of weeks ago that like the CDK the original AWS CDK team I can't remember the name of the guy
Elad Ben Israel, yeah,
yeah, he went on to do Winglang, but
that's true.
that didn't fly.
Reasons about it. A lot of the comments I saw was it's too early. People are not ready for this.
I
Um,
never really got into it. Um, though, yeah. So in my mind, I thought to myself, okay, so CDK doesn't have its BNFL. Is that the right word? I don't know. It doesn't have its have a direction now. So and then
I know that a
I
lot of the original core members have moved on, but there's still a very large community, and I think most of the projects, I know that AWS uses it heavily internally. Like half the time when I look at like ProGen or bootstrapping or, for example, the PDK kit,
okay, so they're using it.
when I look
I
at the features and the issues, the GitHub issues, I see people, I work at this service team at AWS and we have this problem, and this is how this would help us
AWS
to embed
project
this
development
feature.
maker. What is that?
Oh, this is a really cool. What I like about this is that it includes like high-level graph generation, and which is another thing that I believe is something that Terraform is horrible at, and also because of the way that Terraform modules
Wow, you
work.
can generate diagrams from CDK.
Yeah, so there is a project called CDK Dia, and the thing is because you know how these objects, these constructs, they contain like a lot of high level like intent and meaning, right? So they actually capture what they represent. So you can represent those into logos nicely in here.
Wow,
You
I
can
need this.
decorate your constructs.
I need this at work. Wow.
So
But
there's an inspectable interface that you can implement to basically say how you want your construct to be shown on the diagram, which you can't even imagine to do something like that with Terraform.
this is fascinating. So basically, this PDK is some
Not
sort of
just that,
like
it has thread like plugin thread composer. It's integrated with Cloudscape React TS website, so you can build design system, set up CloudFront, do your CDN.
what the hell does Cloudscape React supposed to mean?
It's a system design. Sorry, not system design. It's a design system from AWS. That's how they build their dashboards and their components,
Oh,
as
interesting.
far as I understood. Cloudscape UX design.
Okay, so CDK still has a lot of buy-in because I mean, sorry, like
I'm
what
telling you, it's a whole world, and
because I mean, yeah, to be honest, at work, clients are, for example, this client I'm working
reluctant.
with has been using CDK, and to be
Oh, okay.
honest, it's been fine. I mean, I can get behind it. There's some quality of things that I hate about CDK, like it doesn't seem to be able to plan. Uh,
So that's why Terra constructs would be great.
yeah. But besides that, one of the technologies that they've bought into is a database, and the only official uh,
Provider is
provider
Terraform.
is Terraform. So they're
Yeah,
basically
those are
between.
all cloud formation limitations.
So basically, they're stuck because
Hmm.
they have to start using Terraform. So at the moment, their pipeline looks like CDK deploy and then do your
Hmm.
Terraform applying. Cool beans, but of course the question in my mind is like, okay, we can't just keep on using CDK and keep and then use Terraform as a baseline. We have to think about like moving,
Aligning things.
yeah,
Yeah.
aligning things. So so and yeah, we talked about it before, I'm sure, but like I think Terraform is the de facto winner of the day when it comes to IAC, probably for the next God knows how many years.
Mainly due to adoption.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so I say that, and yeah, so where does CDK fit in with this? The fact that Terraform is definitely not going away, and it's got that
Yeah.
sort of mind share.
So at some
It's an IBM
organizations I
company.
worked, the expectation was that the team decides what they want to use. If they want to use CDK, they can. The platform team had 3 years of platform team stuff. So we were bootstrapping VPCs, EKS clusters, everything with Terraform. And so we just had to provide integration points. That is kind of painful for because you now have to deal with like different execution engines, CloudFormation and so on. It can work if the team takes full ownership of their CDK stack. But the moment, yeah, I've also had experiences where a team has full ownership on their stack and then half the team leaves and one guy is left to maintain it and he was supposed to like work on really cool data
Yeah.
engineering stuff and now he has to maintain an Airflow cluster and he hates it. This sounds very accurate, like too many details. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, I know what you mean with Airflow. I mean, the whole MWAA Airflow 3.0, I don't know if you know about that. That's amazing.
I
That's
haven't used it for the last 5 years, I think.
okay. Well, there's basically no upgrade path between 2 and 3, which makes life fun and interesting. Uh,
LLM
so
upgrade path.
yeah, so LLM upgrade. Um, Yeah, okay. So I guess what you're saying is that CDK and Terraform can live side by side. But then, sorry, where does Terra? I thought when you introduced to me Terra constructs to me, I actually thought in the back of my mind, since because of that problem that we have at work, we have CDK, we have Terraform. I thought you were like almost gifting me the perfect
The
solution
solution.
to my problem, to align everything to Terraform.
Right. So what Terra Constructs does at this point, it's my effort to translate the AWS CDK developer experience on top of the core Terraform resources and provider model, right? So there are some projects. HashiCorp created Terraform CDK to build the foundation to automatically create TypeScript classes that wrap the original Terraform provider so you can configure your Terraform resources using TypeScript or Golang or Python, right? But HashiCorp never built the actual system like service integration patterns. It never built the IAM, the idea of connecting IAM. For example, in this case, when I bind the Lambda handler on top of the REST API, it automatically creates the service role and gives the Lambda service principal the ability to assume that role, like under the hood. And it also
Hmm.
creates, hold on, it also
But
creates the Lambda permission for the gateway. So
yeah,
for the actual execute API gateway to call that
so
Lambda and so on.
wait a minute.
So all of that is built on top of the service integration pattern between Lambda API gateway, and IAM. So that those are patterns
So
that it
you're
that
saying that
exist in the
Terraform,
AWS CDK.
Terraform CDK never did
Never did that.
implement, but
No,
but that to me you're saying that you can't deploy a Lambda with Terraform CDK then because
you
it's never
can,
going to
but
work.
you just have to write your very very nice and small HashiCorp language config file. Now you have to write a complex TypeScript program to generate that config file, which of course a lot of people will say that why would I use Terraform CDK? The idea is that now that you have that TypeScript object, you can build your own abstractions and you can build your own
Hmm.
higher level constructs around it. But there's no interest for HashiCorp to build that, right? They're not
Oh,
AWS
okay. So
specific.
so they just got you
Yes,
bootstrapped.
they got
But
you bootstrapped.
so surely a whole community must have cropped up.
There's there's a few like attempts. So one of them is CDKTF Plus, which was from the original people behind CDKTF. So they tried to build like a level two library of or layer two construct library, which is like 3 years ago. But this is pretty much archived now. And they also built something else, which is called the AWS CDK adapter, where they basically let AWS CDK do its job to generate CloudFormation resources and then map those CloudFormation resources on top of Terraform provider resources. Unfortunately, that doesn't capture half of the functionality that is hidden between these objects interacting with each other. Like the way that you generate resources for CloudFormation is different from the way that you generate them for for Terraform providers, and
Mm.
they try to use a common auto-generated provider through the AWS Cloud Control API. So the Cloud
Mm.
Control API is an attempt to make available the engine behind CloudFormation, so you can actually auto-generate the Terraform provider from that Cloud Controller API. But it's gone GA, I think this year, or maybe was it last year? I'm losing track of the years. Been
What do you
working on this
mean?
for a year.
Oh, what do you mean, Gonji? What did you say? That word made
So
no
it was
sense.
under beta for like 2 or 3 years, and then it went general available. So the project to the AWS CC provider.
Because yeah, like now that you mention it, CloudFormation to Terraform makes sense here because ultimately CDK is producing CloudFormation.
Yes, so they have an adapter, but again, it doesn't capture some of these patterns. So if you align the providers, then you should get the same functionality, but there's still a whole bunch of like resources and patterns that are not supported by this Terraform provider, this auto-generated provider. And to use it, like nobody's really using it because when you look at these resources, you basically get like no. The good thing about Terraform is that when you talk to an API object, you can expand a JSON schema into like very strongly typed like an expanded schema in Terraform language, right? But in this case, the schema is not expanded. Like, let's go to the documentation and look at some of these resources. Maybe take, let's look at the API gateway.
Or maybe it's something simpler, SNS or something. I don't
No, no,
know.
let's look at the API gateway because that is a real
API
resource.
gateway is a nightmare. Are we talking
So here
HTTP?
we have you have the open API spec that you pass in,
Oh
and
my
then you
God.
have the deployment, the stage. But what's missing is the integration, right? Like if you hit here, it's just doing a response. Um, but it's like it's an
Uh,
X Amazon. Anyway, this is not strongly typed. This is just JSON. You end up just shoving JSON all over the place.
yeah. So this is wait a minute.
This one is expanded though.
This project takes CloudFormation and generates those resources. Is that what you're saying, right?
No, this is the cloud control generated Terraform provider. So there's two providers for AWS. One is manually written and maintained by people. Every time AWS releases a new feature, adds a new field, adds a new whatever to any service, somebody gets, a pull request or somebody issue is
Great.
created and then
Yeah.
it's added in
Nice.
um, manually and manually mapped. So a lot of like decisions have been made to do things a certain way, which is like completely different from the way CloudFormation does it, right?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So
So
the Terraform provided AWS is written by humans. That also means it's kind of like a curated experience because it kind of tries to make sense of where it expands things or how does it expose certain configuration fields. For example, the way that you define, I think it's like on the again because I did the API gateway conversion recently. There was the way that you define the method responses on an API gateway the way that the actual API endpoint works is with like a JSON patch. Like you have one endpoint and you have to like JSON patch in the differences. And in
mm,
the provider, they made a different resource for each one of them. And when under the hood, the provider will build the JSON patch and send it to that one endpoint to achieve what you're trying to do. So this is a type of stuff that they can do because of the API endpoint that API gateway exposes is very complex for a human to build a JSON patch.
mm,
And then CloudFormation does a similar thing. It kind of like abstracts away this complexity of that the way that API is built and allows you to define it in one resource. But in Terraform provided AWS, they made like many different resources, and the Golang code takes care of it like building a nice little patch under the hood. So the way that you write your config is really nice. So that's the advantage of a manual written provider, right? Compared
mm.
to like an AWS CC auto-generated provider. But that also means that most of the tooling, like code scanning and everything, is around this provider because everyone is the one using it. Like all of the Terraform linting, all of the Terraform security scanning, all of the Terraform cost calculation tooling is around this provider because everyone's using this provider,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, that's top provider by like a long way, I'm sure.
Yes. I'm not sure about like I know some people sometimes say like we're using AWS CC because the feature has not been built on top of the manually maintained one, and the CC one has a chance to adopt features faster because it's
And
auto-generated.
and do you know how AWS CC works? I mean, they must have a pipeline that kicks off with.
Yeah, they have a lightweight proxy API to discover, provision, and manage cloud resources. So they auto-generate it. I guess it
Because like the source of
auto-generates.
truth for AWS, if I remember, is like a Mason schema or something like that that describes their APIs. I'm not so
Yeah,
sure.
that's part of the PDK here as well. They have the TypeSafe API, Smithy, I
Smitty.
think.
Why did I
Yeah,
say Mason? Uh,
Smith because Mason Smith, same thing. I don't know.
ah, it must be
Uh,
linked. Yes, it must be linked.
yes, you're an LLM
Because
after all.
like 10 years ago, I was working on in a video startup in Singapore. I'm sure, I don't know if you remember. That's probably when we met. And
Mm.
interestingly, um, the service hadn't launched, and AWS gave us like this JSON file that was generated with Mason, if I remember correctly. I don't know why Mason, it's probably the wrong word, but they gave us a JSON file, and then we just copied it under the AWS CLI directory. And then
Mm.
all of a sudden, we had all these commands available to us, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, I haven't heard about that. That sounds really cool. But yeah, as far as I know, Smithy is the language they use for like
Yeah,
API
that sounds right.
specifications or
That sounds
definition.
right.
Yeah. So that's a cool thing about the AWS project development kit again, because they have this like REST API generation from Smithy, and this is how you build your product. So it's kind of like build on top of the AWS CDK to do that. But yeah, the whole thing I was saying is that you have different providers. One of them is very popular but manually maintained. The other one is auto-generated but doesn't have the full coverage. And I hear from people that there's still quite a few errors or problems that they're facing. So
But that
I haven't
almost
really explored it
that
much.
almost doesn't make sense. Surely something that's auto-generated has full coverage.
No, it didn't have full. No, because the Cloud Control API doesn't have full coverage. The thing
What?
that backs this, yes, it's the control. If you go to the website for the AWS Control Cloud Control API, it will tell you how much of their actual services they do cover on this.
But
Uh,
that's I mean, didn't Jeff Bezos
because
add
every
that?
team developed, it's like a two-pizza team in AWS, right? They build their own services. Nobody did a centralized Cloud Control API, so they started
But
building a centralized Cloud Control API.
I
To me,
thought
it
that.
kind of makes sense.
But wait a minute. Like the folklore goes that Jeff Bezos mandated that every service team publishes their API. It sounds like they don't if they can't if it can't be syndicated by the Cloud Control API.
Let's look at a year-old LLM summary. Uh, ah, see, for example, the certificate doesn't support update. Maybe that's simply because you can't do that. But here's a little table for you of the coverage. Maybe this is also, maybe this relates directly to the coverage. Looks like it has quite a lot. But where are the services not covered though? This is anything that is covered. Um, I'm wondering if local stack is using this because they have a very similar table. So local stack might be using this to generate um, their local stack
So it's
coverage.
just to reiterate what I think you're saying to me, you're saying that the Terraform AWS provider has more coverage than something that was auto-generated.
When they G8 the AWS CC, they put out a number on the number of resources covered, and it's looked like it was the same number. But when you looked into it, it was actually a bunch of like a split between some of the resources. Or maybe I'm getting this wrong because the Terraform provider AWS has special resources that don't really have a backing API. But I need to look into it. They do have like, that's definitely something maybe we can add in later as a clarification on
Okay.
how much is the coverage actually of the AWS
Okay.
CC provider,
Okay.
but there is a difference.
How did we even get here? Oh my God.
Okay,
We talked about Terra constructs. We talked about why
and we started with
CDK.
SpecKit. We started with SpecKit and how it like formalizes or gives you workflow to do your LLM work like development. We talked about some evolution in the cloud code budgeting. We talked about you then asked me more about um more about towards Terraform and why I built something like Terra Constructs, I think. So I gave some examples about the evolution of the cloud, and the fact that it changed and became so complex, and that the integration patterns between the services are complex, and therefore a simple config file or a Terraform module doesn't do it anymore. So that's where I also give you examples of why the AWS CDK is so great. And we talked a little bit about like it not really being maintained, but there's still being a lot of new
Okay.
features being added. right?
with Terra constructs, I thought I saw it as a way as migrating. It does now that I'm speaking with you at length. It sounds like you are not thinking like that. You're thinking that you're going to still leverage CDK, but your output is going to be Terraform.
No, so there isn't a project from HashiCorp that puts a host service, a host object around AWS CDK, and then encapsulates the process. Like when AWS CDK generates something, it then generates the Terraform. I'm not doing that. That's the adapter project, and I don't believe it can achieve the actual functionality required. Okay, and we talked, and that's why we ended up talking about AWS CC because it uses that AWS CC provider that not so many people use, that doesn't have all of this ecosystem tooling around it, and that doesn't like allow you. I believe like I talked to some people behind the project, and they told me that it's really just for early stage companies like quickly want to prototype how moving towards Terraform would help them. Maybe get them halfway there. Like have existing AWS CDK programs and put like a crutch around it. So you understand what I'm saying? It's called the AWS adapter, and but it's not like a long-term solution for your. Yeah, it's called the AWS adapter for CDK. And as far as I understand, it's not something like if you start Greenfield, you should start, oh, I'm going to write AWS CDK and then I'm going to use the adapter. I'm going to be using Terraform. That's not what it's for. It's meant to be like we have a lot of AWS CDK stacks. We want to like quickly convert them over to Terraform. And this can give you like a quick bridge towards Terraform. That's how I understand it. Okay. So
Mm.
I threw that away and I started on originally not so detailed. I want to be able to programmatically build Terraform configurations, and the Terraform CDK seemed like a good solution to me, but then I realized it's missing a lot of stuff. So I started building high level, but then I keep going lower and ultimately ended up re-implementing all of the core features like asset pipeline, bundling pipeline, IAM pipeline, like the actual IAM modules, the concept of the interfaces and the patterns, the way it works under the
And
hood.
these are called level two constructs, right? The
Yes.
asset pipeline. Okay.
Correct. Asset pipeline is more like CLI tooling around it, but you could say it's part of the L2 stack construct because it's
Okay.
like a higher level. It's using the low level stack, CloudFormation stack under the hood, but it's adding a whole bunch of
Okay.
functionality around it.
And just for my vocabulary, L1 is the low level, L2 is like the asset pipeline. Is there an L3? No.
So there are some L3s which are created by professional services at AWS, where they have like some more advanced cloud patterns, maybe for banks that are building like a subscriber, like producer type of pattern in the cloud. So they will use several L2s and combine them into a cloud pattern so
Hmm.
that it can be used by businesses. That would be an L3, or an L3 might be maybe the real product that I'm building at my company
Right.
that is actually deploying the front end, deploying the back end
Like the whole
workers.
product. That makes sense. So
Yeah.
and then the other terminology I'm just mapping into these L1, L2, L3 is like construct and pattern. So a construct would be level one, and then a pattern would be level two. Like how do you, or it's not a very good mapping.
They apply the L label to all constructs. So constructs are either of L1 or L2 or L3. So the
Ah,
L1 constructs are auto-generated from the basic resources that are available in CloudFormation, or if you're talking about Terraform, the L1 resources are the ones that are the Terraform provider resources
okay,
directly.
okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense because I think I got confused by that. So and then where does the word pattern fit in here? It doesn't really fit in.
Yeah, I think it's more like when they talk about L3, there's like the service team. I know that there is like a website from AWS service team that says that these are L3 patterns. These are a bucket with a Lambda invocation triggers, for example. That's a pattern that you may want, which is a very common pattern that you build in Terraform as well, right? You have a module that creates, I have a bucket, and then I have a handler for a function that whenever an object gets pushed in, maybe I have some type of filtering logic to invoke the Lambda. That's like a module that you would build, right? And in Terraform, you would build that module from the low level L1, Lambda
Yeah.
resource and the bucket and the service permission, the IAM role resource and all that. In in AWS CDK, you will build that L3 using the L2 construct, which is encapsulating the Lambda and knows how to bind itself. It's backed by an I principle. That means that the Lambda has a IAM role behind it, right? So it exposes itself as a interface. So it's I am a principal, and a principal you can grant it things, right? So when you have a bucket, and then you need to give permission to the Lambda, you are basically you're using the grant method that accepts an I principal. The I principal can be a Lambda in this case, but it
Yeah.
can also be an EC2 instance, right?
Isn't the better terminology would be to call it like a service principle because it's the service is
I think it's closely tied to the IAM terminology, which like in an IAM policy, you have the principal, the resource, the action. I
yeah,
forgot the rest. So they use the same idea, the I
conditions.
principle. The only
Uh,
new one, yeah,
but
the only
but
new
they
one is the grant.
but there can be different types of principles, right? You can have a user principle, but you can have a
Yeah.
human
So all of
and
that
a
is hidden
service.
behind I principle in the IAM module. Yeah.
Okay, we're probably just splitting hairs at this point. Okay, so Terra constructs. Um, so I still actually don't quite understand. So where's it going to fit in a company? Just where people.
So the way that we use it at my organization is we have 3 years of Terraform, landing zone, and so on. And then we had the product teams that wanted to build with CDKTF because they prefer TypeScript. They write their lambdas in TypeScript. They write their Next.js, front end, back end, BFF, whatever.
Oh
And
Jesus.
they like TypeScript and they wanted CDKTF. And I had experience with AWS CDK and I was like, yeah, I encourage it. I mean, I would rather you not use AWS CDK because of CloudFormation than I have, like you said, I have to build a CI/CD pipeline to do the plan, to post the preview in my PR. I've got all of that already. I've got Terraform, I've got Atlantis, I've got,
Okay.
coordination,
So
collaboration.
so
So
how
we
does the
needed
pipeline?
CDKTF.
So basically, how does the pipeline work? The product has its repo. It writes its the CDK. And then you have a like a GitHub action or something that basically turns their CDK into Terraform and runs it, or do you like get a snapshot and then you commit it to your own Terraform repo or something?
Yeah, so I just did this presentation at the AWS Community Day in Kuala Lumpur,
Oh
Malaysia,
yeah, how was
where I
that by the way? Was that at the AWS offices, right? Or
yeah, it
what?
was no, it was at university in Kuala Lumpur.
Oh,
But I do cover exactly how does the workflow work between the team. So how do I
okay. We need to link this
present it?
link in the description.
Yeah. So this is an example of an L2. This is actually more like an L3 because this is like a load balanced Fargate service. So this uses under the hood. It uses something called patterns. So under the hood, it actually set up a load balancer. It set up an ECS Fargate task definition
Patterns. So
that links everything
that's
together.
something that comes out of AWS CDK, right?
Yes, there's a separate library of patterns, and an application load balanced Fargate service is a composition of several of the L2 constructs to expose this as
Okay, okay.
such.
So pattern does exist. Okay, I wasn't going crazy. Okay,
I think patterns is like the service team built L3s, I think.
that makes
I think
sense.
when you talk about L3s, it's like you can build L3s, and we build a couple of L3s, and we expose them as a pattern library. Yeah, I also forgot about that. It
Hmm.
exists. That's the name of the library. Yeah. So our workflow at my organization with CDKTF is that the product team lives in their own repository, right? And we're trying to reduce the number of repositories. So if a product team has front end and back end and an infrastructure, we're trying to use more of a monorepos now because we became good at them. We use like a many monorepos, so it's kind of like
So one product, one repo, right? That's what you're aiming
yeah.
for. Okay, that makes sense.
Yes, kind of like, the idea of is it Conway's Law, where you organize your services based on your team or your organization layout. So if you have
Yeah.
one team working on one product. So we
Well,
have the
yeah.
product monorepo, and they are defining their product in TypeScript, Lambdas, whatever, tightly integrated with their infra resources that they require for their product. Some of the resources, like in this case, the cluster, the VPC, they will be injected when they integrate into the landing zone, right? But they must be able to define those, and they do that in a very strongly typed language, TypeScript, and they use Terra constructs. Originally, they use CDKTF, but that means they have to build their own L2s. Instead, we are building the L2s publicly, make them available on Apache 2, and then we are using them internally within our organization. Okay?
Nice, nice.
So
So,
then, yeah.
okay, so I mean, like, I'm just thinking of my current client. They use CDK, and then they also use Terraform. So, so why? What? I mean, surely didn't you think about allowing the product team to run their CDK?
I was lucky they didn't ask, they didn't push for it. I think about it. I was thinking actually about pointing them towards Pulumi SST because that's kind of a bit of a similar idea. But then we would need to adopt Pulumi because Pulumi is cross-cloud. But then I wasn't sure about like the self-hosted Pulumi story, and at the time I didn't know that you could like self-host Pulumi. I only heard that it was expensive and that you had to pay for the cloud and
Well,
so on.
but I'm not too sure why you're talking about Pulumi because you can't just you could have
Yeah,
a
I could
GitHub
have let
hyper.
them use CloudFormation, right? And then they
Yeah.
could publish a
So
CloudFormation
you didn't even
template.
you didn't want to go there or something. What were you?
No, I have experience with that in the past. We had one team heavily in CloudFormation, and then we had the whole rest of the company, data team, everyone else using Terraform. And I was put as part of the team that was using AWS CDK, and I was completely convinced that AWS CDK was way better. I was put in there to convert them to Terraform, and they converted me to, the CDK story. And then I spent a year trying to build integration patterns between Terraform and CloudFormation. So you must consume like integration between two different products, and then you must expose them. So I was using SSM Parameter Store as an integration
Yeah.
registry, which is Keith Morris, infrastructure as code.
Keith Morris is my line manager. I don't know if I told you
Exactly,
that.
right? You told me that. So I followed his advice about his infrastructure as code, third edition, whatever, book, and followed the integration pattern of a integration registry using SSM parameter store. Now,
The okay,
tell
just
him I sent him a message on LinkedIn and he never replied.
okay. I'll let Keith know. Keith, if you're watching, respond. Uh, okay. So chapter what 17? You're oddly specific here, Vincent. But carry
Yeah,
on.
because I did a presentation about it. I called it Integrate This. I did it like at the time when I had just finished building the integration patterns, and I thought, this is great. Um,
And that's the latest book, right? Because he had a
Yes, I have O'Reilly subscription, so I get access
uh,
early access, and I read it.
quick.
Um, so these are the actual diagrams from his book, and he's talking about organizing your infrastructure and then the different integration patterns. You have one provider, you have one consumer, and then you can do resource matching, which is you look up the resources based on some tags, or you can do stack data lookup. So if you have one stack in CloudFormation, and then it has some outputs, so you need to read those CloudFormation outputs and then integrate them within another CloudFormation stack, for example. But need to know what the team is using. And then the other one is the integration registry lookup pattern,
Yeah.
where everyone writes to a different key convention, and then you can look up through the integration registry, right?
Oh, okay, okay. I mean, this is quite common actually. So Keith basically wrote it up. I mean, I've seen this everywhere.
Yes.
SSM is the registry.
Yeah, so when we adopted it, we didn't have strong conventions about the format of the keys. What are the different paths that you need to capture? We didn't have a clear guideline of how to write your dependencies out and how to read them back. Because if you put some rules around that, then you can, determine that this will be like a network will have a list of subnet ideas, and so you read it out the right way. Because now you're in typed languages like CDK and Terraform,
Oh, so
maybe you
so
can read it properly.
so so did Keith go specify the actual typing?
No, I don't think that's part of it. It just mentioned that this is a pattern you can follow. It's
Oh,
just my personal experience when I started to use it, we had problems like that. Like p teams didn't have a clear way or convention on how to write to it.
mm,
Another problem is that this becomes a layer of indirection and becomes stale. Like how do you, keep it up to date? How do you know that the value has changed? How do you notify? Also, because it's a layer of indirection, how do you have direct connectivity between provider and consumer? How do you know everyone that consumes that key? If you don't have like an actual like pointer counting, like if you do this in memory, you will keep track of how many um, actual variables point to the stack, right? So you
Yeah.
have some counter, and then you can know if anyone is still reading it. And so none of that, right? And so when you start, it sounds very simple, and I was very confident. I did this presentation. I say this solves all of our problems, but at that time, I already realized that like having some type of generics around it, so that we can type when we read it back out, is actually really nice. But that never really happened, right? Our teams had written a whole bunch of stuff into SSM parameter store, and then we couldn't really keep track of like who was consuming it. I also thought that this was great, that this was a read indirection layer, because now it meant that I could move things around and then just update the registry from different places. Big mistake, because you have no idea where it comes from. So, so this pattern is why I did not like my teams to use CloudFormation and then adopt some type of indirection layer to communicate with them, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
actually tried to roll this out, and I had my landing zone publish all of its like integration points into the SSM parameter store. And then you get other problems like how do you control the consumer permissions, or who can write to these keys? How do you, do you cross post? Like, do you have a central one, or do you have this one provider write to different accounts where they have to find it? So there's a lot of problems there. And I decided I'm just going to get rid of this whole problem by just using the native built-in Terraform stack feature, which is, Terraform outputs, right?
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm just mapping
So,
this to my own experience about a registry. I think the one at my workplace that we ended up just doing is essentially we keep a huge a conf like a source of truth, a JSON file in GitHub, and we use that to sort of coordinate a lot of stuff because like,
yeah,
hey, you want to know where this is, which account this goes into, what what secret you
it's
need.
horrible, isn't it?
I I like it.
It's horrible.
I like a single large JSON file. I mean, because you know
JSON
when
even worse. If it was YAML, you wouldn't
I,
have all these like trailing commas or next line changes when, these Git
well,
diffs would look a little bit better.
in my opinion, the JSON is just an output here, but
Mm.
it's good. It's a better paradigm than sprinkling stuff across an SSM paths for Christ's sake.
Yeah, yeah, agree. So very common, like you said, is the TF-vars in Terraform world, where people, copy paste TF-vars files around. For this environment, we need those TF-vars. From that environment, we need this
Yeah,
TF-vars.
yeah.
It's a
So
bit similar
but like
with,
but this is like even bigger. This is across environments,
yeah.
so on and
With
so forth.
TerraGrunt, you also have the ability to like define dependencies, and it automatically create the JSON files and caches them under the hood, and then it keeps track of them to like more quickly run like consumer provider interactions and so on. But TerraGrunt again also very quickly becomes like sprawls out of control, right? So you ask me like, why did I not just allow them to write their infrastructure in AWS CDK? And I'm telling you, my biggest problem was the integration patterns. You're saying one solution could have been to create more like a central file so that they would need to read from there, and things like that. But when you say central file, it sounds very similar to SSM parameter store.
Yeah, but SSM parameter store gets out of hand because you could use arbitrary paths. You can use
What about the JSON file?
arbitrary.
What are the arbitrary like fields paths that you use in the JSON
They're,
file?
they're just they're just keys, and the
But what is the
schema.
structure of the keys, and are they nested keys?
Well,
You have the same problem.
they are nested. Yeah.
Yeah, how?
Well,
That's where you then get similar problems.
I think majority of them are just keys. They're not like lists, if that makes sense.
That's, I think, one thing I learned about Terraform, because a lot of people, when they write a module, they go like, well, this resource that I just created should really be accessible. And they just, output all of the attributes of the resource to the module. And then, you basically have zero encapsulation. The idea of modules is a bit encapsulation so that you don't create these deeply nested attributes, dictionary key values, but you rather create individual outputs. Like if you want the gateway endpoint, there's a variable. That's one key for the gateway endpoint. If you want the
Hmm.
subnet ID, maybe maybe that's a list because subnet ID is usually like three, whatever. But not deeply nested objects. Basically, detailed attributes as individual outputs.
Yeah, I think we're aligned there. Yeah, but like
Yeah.
it works well.
Mhm.
And the best thing of all, because I don't think SSM can really do this very well, except you can look back in the versions. But like the brilliant thing about a central registry is that you have the really nice change log.
You have logs on SSM parameter store, but I
I
think
mean,
the
you
idea is
have
this: either
yeah,
you put it in Git,
yeah,
or you have
exactly.
something wrapping more as a service around SSM parameter store. But just like no control over parameter store is definitely a recipe for disaster,
Yeah,
right?
a config file in Git is the sweet spot for me. I know it works well.
Okay.
But anyway,
So
we're getting a little bit distracted. I mean, so you were saying you were pushing people. You didn't want people to deploy to run CDK deploy just because of coordination issues, I guess is what I'm hearing.
yes, one of the main issues was to avoid stale values and copy value across the source of truth of the integration. Because this again is not in a single repo, right? It's across many repositories. And because of that, we originally had tried to have the product monorepo run the Terraform apply and consume across SSM parameter store, but that didn't really work. So instead, we still keep the dev infra directly applied from the product monorepo. So for the dev environment, they can run Terraform apply every time they make a change without going through any integration repository. But when they want to go towards, um, so when they run apply here on the dev infra folder, basically the package gets consumed in the dev infra application or environment. And when the developer runs apply, it creates the environment, the resources in pink here, purple here, and then the integration with like the dev ingress ALB and the dev VPC and so on, right? So we are copying over the VPC ID, the ALB reference as values into the dev monorepo, but we're not copying staging and prod and all the other environments, just one, only dev. Okay?
Okay, okay.
Right. So
Environment
they're
separation, okay.
completely they
Isolation.
have full control over their dev environment, which they should. They should be able to do what they need, right? And then when it comes to actually promoting this out of dev, they've done their QA themselves, and they want to put this into like staging or pre-prod. That's where they are versioning and releasing a an actual artifact. So they're publishing their infra package, which no longer is a module. We don't need special Terraform registry or anything like that. We can just use their existing PNPM workflow or NPM packaging workflow or Python if they want, because CDK can be Python, but we don't do that. So you don't need like special artifact management for infrastructure anymore. Infrastructure is managed the same way as your code. You're deploying, you're publishing and minting, versioning, changelog, everything. All of your tools can just be reused, and we push it into code artifact.
So
Okay?
I'm still a little bit puzzled here. You call it a package, but is surely it's not a whole bunch of code. Surely it's just some
Oh, it is a bunch
configuration.
of code. It is a bunch of code.
So
It
you
is like tasks.
so basically the code and dev and the code and
It's if you are
wait a
familiar
minute.
with Kubernetes, we don't
Oh,
use
sorry.
Kubernetes. So it's
I'm
like a Kubernetes Helm chart,
oh
pretty much.
okay. Sorry. I read product as production. Sorry. I think that's where I was confused.
It's good you asked this because this is the most common question I get about Terra constructs. Like, it sounds great, but how do you actually use it? And that's what I try to focus on this presentation.
So yeah, you were saying that this is the most common questions. Why or something?
Yeah, so after I talk about all of the great things that you can, that you get because now you get these really nice developer patterns or
Yeah,
service
yeah.
integration
I
patterns and
now that you mentioned Atlantis, yeah, Atlantis is great. I actually need to work out how to introduce that into my company.
mm. So I have a custom build AMI and I have custom CDKTF workflows and I want to for Terra constructs and I want to publish my AMI as like the bootstrap for Terra Constructs. So if you want to start with Terra Constructs in your organization, here is your construct to bootstrap Atlantis. So it deploys Atlantis with all of the settings for
Mm.
running CDKTF synthesis to Terraform, running Terraform apply, integration with your pull request and all that. That's my
Yeah,
goal,
I mean, if you, yeah, like if you,
but I don't have it yet.
if your elevator pitch is basically how to use Atlantis with CDK, I think I get it, actually.
My pitch is you want better DevX for your developers, and most people are like, it's complicated. Why do I need an additional synthesis step? How do I integrate it into my Atlantis? I can't control my developers and my engineers. They are very creative. They create really convoluted infrastructure if I let them write them in TypeScript. How do you control that? Well, that's where I think part of like platform team is that you surface the patterns so that you can,
Mm.
with bootstraps, so that you extract the convoluted patterns into reusable patterns. I don't know,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
keep
I
the
mean,
things aligned. I mean, the same thing
yeah.
with modules, right? People are gonna
It,
write crazy modules.
it sounds like you are doing a great thing in a sense, like allowing the product team to use a code that's familiar to them, but ultimately keeping Terraform as the first class
Yeah,
infrastructure DevX. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
I'm trying to bridge the platform team and the product team. Because the platform team lives in breeds Terraform. They have 3 years of,
Yeah.
code scanning. They have their whatever. Maybe they're not using Atlantis, but they have their own GitHub workflows to run and apply. Their Terraform with pull requests like PR
Mm.
reviews,
So
previews. Sorry. Yeah.
I love what you just said there. Building a bridge between platform and product team. Though, like, I'm just also mapping this to my current gig right now. I mean, I think if I showed them this at my workplace, they would be terrified because we don't want products to develop to write infrastructure as code. We want them to configure, like, we want a very, very tight configuration for them. Like, or,
Find this funny, because there's this saying. Is it from we want products to be able to do what they need to do without being blocked by platform, right? Platform must provide golden paths, must provide easy adoption for
yeah,
the cloud, but they cannot be the bottleneck. They cannot be the ones that are preventing the team. Um,
well,
so
that's,
there's
I agree. I totally agree with that. But like, but in a
it's
big,
Gregor Hoff.
yeah, but in a big company, it's not scalable. I can see it making a
No,
thousand
that's why
percent sense.
platform teams exist, right? Platform teams are supposed to provide
Uh,
the tools so that you can keep it under control, so that the product teams can still evolve. So you, in like big banks, you will have like a declarative YAML config file that under the hood sets up 10 different Terraform modules in just the right way so that they get deploy what they need, or maybe use custom resources because you're on Kubernetes or whatever, right? So this is from PlatformCon 2024, talk from Gregor Hopfe. And he talks like,
hmm.
nobody wants 80% of DynamoDB. Like your module is not just like exposing same defaults as a better DynamoDB. Under the hood, they still need the features of DynamoDB. And if your module
Mm.
doesn't expose it, your module is not better. Right? It's just restricting access to it, but it's
That's very interesting. Did you ever meet Gregor? Because he lived in Singapore a fair few years.
I was at a few conferences where he was as well, but I never really interacted much with him.
Yeah, he spoke at the AWS meetup too. This is
Hmm.
very interesting because, like, I mean, I feel like I've been drinking through a straw somehow because every gig I'm on, we make a module to give 80% to the developer, and now you're sort of flipping the table over here by saying that no, you your platform
I th
team should be allowing them to
one
do
of my
whatever.
previous CTOs at a previous company. He was ex-AWS as well. I don't think he was in a technical role there, but he basically had a lot of experience on how they did things at AWS. And he says the platform team's responsibility is to put in guardrails. They're not the bottleneck. They just need to make sure that teams can do what they need to do without shooting themselves in the foot. So your job really is put in place, the scanners, the linters, and the dashboards around it. So if we do have a misconfiguration, we can catch it as most to the
Yeah,
left as possible, left to the.
I mean, I'm fully behind that. Like, so basically, the platform team isn't producing modules; they're more like producing conf test type stuff, right? Or
Yeah,
linting type stuff. But like, I've just never
but at the
seen that.
same time, like
I've never seen
one
that
role of
happen.
the platform team is to observe teams' usage of the cloud and extract golden paths so that we can keep teams aligned so that teams don't do completely different things so that if a new team wants to start a new project they have a tech radar and they can figure out
Mm.
today the recommended way of doing that is using this golden path,
That
and if I followed
definitely
this golden path.
that
You
definitely
haven't
doesn't
seen that.
happen in my current workplace. Like the idea is that we're laying the tracks before the product teams get there, and hopefully it's the tracks that they want to take.
Which is something that I've always heard as a complaint around platform teams. And actually, one company I worked at was very resistant and very against towards moving towards a platform team. They had embedded SREs. There was a huge
Yeah, yeah.
compliance initiative, and they completely refused because they were, you guys are going to be a bottleneck. You're going to prevent us to do what
Yeah.
we want to
And
do.
just to be clear, I as an infrastructure engineer, I hate platform teams. The whole idea for me is just terrible. I'm more in favor of a cross-functional embedded
Yeah,
infrastructure engineer pattern. But
yeah.
I always end up as the infrastructure engineer in a platform team, essentially.
And
Uh,
the funny thing is, I've been at a lot of organizations that try to push me towards an embedded SRE role, and I always end up completely withdrawing myself from product and focusing 100% on the cloud and the CI/CD and how to make a solution that stretches across all the teams, and then complaining if people are not using it. So I have like the opposite like
okay,
habits of
so
you, but I try to really focus now. Like I want to be part of the product team. I
so
want to
I
be part of
mean,
the roadmap, but
so
it's
this
very hard for me.
there's some very interesting approaches here. I mean, can you? I mean, I can't claim to. I can't claim the current working approach in my client is successful. I can't claim that at all. But it's very conservative and very established way of doing things. Can you honestly say to me, Vincent, that you've worked with product teams and you've given them a golden, what did you say?
The golden path.
A golden path and they loved it? I mean, that sounds also kind of, let's be honest, it,
I say
it
that I give them a golden path and they loved it?
well, I mean,
I did work at one
that's
organization.
what you're alluding to, right?
So I did in that same organization where they went full in on AWS CDK, where the platform team had a lot of Terraform. We had a very heavy Kubernetes footprint, and we built a Golang CLI that bootstrapped deployments on top of Kubernetes. And we had the funny thing is we had like 40 brands, and but it was behind it was always this two teams, and so it was very easy to roll it out across the teams, and we were able to like align all of the teams. But we did get the feedback from the CTO, like I didn't mean to create like an isolated team that built a platform and then another isolated and then the product team. I wanted a DevOps. I wanted, embedded SREs. I
Exactly.
wanted
Yeah.
you guys to build on, for the product. And I mean, I don't know. We rolled it out. We used it. We use Argo CD, so it was generating all of the manifests for our GitOps, and it was able to centralize the Helm charts. So we had like the ability to roll out and make changes. I think the biggest problem, right, when teams move away from like embedded SREs towards platform teams is compliance. when you start doing audits and SOC 2 and all that. Then suddenly now you have to integrate the zero trust all over the company. Now you suddenly have to have the, bill of software bill of material, SBOM, and you have to track and, provide audit reports that you are addressing vulnerabilities on time. You have to provide your full network infrastructure and your firewall rules as a compliance audit report quarterly. You have to have break glass functionality. When all of that becomes imperative to the product teams, suddenly you need to have a more centralized approach towards managing your infrastructure. And that's where organizations tend to then switch more towards platform teams. That's also, I think, one of HashiCorp's presentations from like evolution of like maturity. So all of the organizations start with this. Um, no, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted.
Presenter view. Who does that?
Uh, I'm clearly not a dude that's used to make presentations. Anyway, so stage one, like singular teams, ad hoc approach, everyone does whatever they want. Thing to
Mm,
standardizing, centralized approach, policy enforcement, team collaborations, and then platform team,
yeah,
self-service, government
scaling. Yeah,
patterns,
I'm
right?
usually in that stage three. What do you call that? Journey. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that's also funny because like most startups or organizations don't hire DevOps until they start hitting these centralization problems, right? And then they're hiring DevOps because they have reliability issues. They have disparity in technology stacks across different teams. They have no way of like rolling out compliance. But the good thing is they have money, they have revenue, and so they can hire a DevOps team, which is DevOps, the whole idea of like being embedded and like breaking down the walls, doing agile, now we actually are hiring a system administration team to help us adopt the cloud and tame it.
So
And
are you suggesting standardizing is the embedded approach? Because
no, no. Standardizing is the platform approach.
yeah, because I thought
A lot of organizations they will have some people.
so stage one is the cross-functional team approach, right?
Yeah,
And then already on stage two we have to have a
cross-functional. What do you mean with cross-functional?
oh
I think
they
stage one is when every team has like cross-functional meaning every team has a guy doing DevOps or the CI/CD.
yeah,
Every team
exactly.
more like embedded, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's interchangeable here to me. So
Mm.
stage one is embedded because
Yeah, yeah.
because
Same. I understand.
because at my consultancy employer we always advocate a cross-functional embedded infrastructure engineer, but it never really happens for one reason or another, as I mentioned. So and that's already stage one. I feel that's kind of
No,
frightening
no.
because
There's a very interesting book that one of a candidate I interviewed pointed me at. I think he worked at ThoughtWorks as well. He told me that to read team topologies, which is there's an evolution of the teams and how you like there's an in between. There's like fully embedded, everyone does its own. There's like platform at the complete opposite, and then there's like across like a lot of like bandwidth between
hmm,
how you may have.
because this diagram doesn't seem to even it's either like
Yeah, no, this is a sales pitch from HashiCorp, which sells a platform solution, right?
yeah yeah I get it
Yeah, so this was a original slideshow that I made for before I started Terra Constructs, which was the idea was to make something called the Environment Toolkit, and I don't know why I cannot zoom out anymore. But basically, the problem is that we have two personas in a lot of organizations. We have product teams, we have platform teams. Well, there's a few others, but like, and the idea was like the app team, they are the ones that need the like a very nice interface. They
oh
should, if you just give them YAML without any schema, then they may not really know how it works. And it's not a very nice experience for them, but that's commonly what's done today, which is like you give them a YAML spec file that they have to fill in, and then under the hood, the platform team builds the actual
yeah
modules. Like you say, they
yeah
set the path, they build
exactly
the things, right? Um,
why do you say
my
it's not
idea,
why do you
sorry,
say it's not very nice because like
YAML.
well
I say
to me
YAML is not very nice.
well I mean it's a lot easier than them bloody writing code CDK, let's be honest.
Why is the file read only? This is my file.
And
Okay.
maybe a separate
Sorry,
conversation
what did you say again about what's
like
not
what
very nice?
the YAML driven product team. What's wrong with that?
The problem with YAML is that if you miss a space, you get an error. If you
Okay, then
don't know
you should use
exactly
Pickle.
where,
Use Pickle, guys.
no, you should use a proper programming language.
Well,
Stop
Pickle,
inventing all these additional like Q and what's the other ones? JSONNet and like there's a thousands of them. There's a hundreds
yeah.
of them. And
Well,
all of them have the same
I
problem.
well,
Oh,
I
they
do like
become a programming language ultimately in the end. All of them become programming languages.
during that conf camp in Ghent. I met some Apple engineers, and they pitched Pickle, and I was convinced that Pickle is a really good way
Yeah,
of
so that's what I'm trying to say with this thing here. There's a whole bunch of like you just told me, the IDE experience. Does Pickle have a nice
yes.
IDE
It does.
IntelliSense?
Unfortunately, it
God damn it.
they seem to
Wrong example.
they seem to favor JetBrains, but
Oh, so anyway, does
but
Pickle have a proper package
the
manager and registry?
yes, yes,
Shit.
it's so good. It's so good.
This is Pickle Turing complete?
I think so. Yes.
Wrong. A Config language shouldn't be Turing complete. Then why are
Okay.
you not writing it
Okay.
in Golang?
You can't expect people to pick up Golang.
Yeah, so
But
so
Pickle's
my
designed to for one task in mind. It's explained to me by the Apple engineer. He says like, uh, you know, you need it's the alarm has gone off. It's 2 a.m. and you need to make that change safely. So so essentially, you're logging into that machine at 2 a.m. and making a config change that you could literally cannot mess up.
okay. Well, I don't know why I'm getting these results here, but it says the learning curve is really difficult. It has a GVM depends because I
It,
entered why you should not use Pickle.
that's actually a very good answer. Yeah, that's very good answer. Like, but yeah, you're right. It does require JVM, but I can look past that. And it does have a learning curve, but like, oh my God, I mean,
It's enhanced safety and maintainability. It's reduced duplication. It's abstraction of modality. To me, Pickle sounds like JSONNet. Like, why should I use Pickle and not JSONNet?
Jason is horrible when I last looked at it.
Yeah. So agree. Like, I never really got JSONNet properly.
And also
So
very, very verbose. Like Pickle's very tight, actually. It looks and reads very nicely.
I
Um,
may have to play with it. But I
the
my reason to get into Terra constructs and TypeScript was specifically because TypeScript is everywhere. It's that's one of my tenets in life
but
in the
still,
last 5 years.
I don't think I can get behind. I mean, I can maybe you're working with startups, but I still think product teams. Maybe I've been working for too many big companies and stuff.
Mm,
Product teams
yeah.
shouldn't be writing a CDK. It's gonna get crazy real quick.
That's always like when I talk about this as a standard reply, startups shouldn't be writing CD, like product engineers shouldn't be touching infra code. And my
I mean,
argument is
I
that,
mean, startups and mid-sized companies, I think it's actually pretty quite good. But if you're like a large, heavily regulated industry, that's
yeah, so
never gonna fly.
and I think at that point you don't ask the product engineer to write it, but you give the platform engineer the right tools to build better extractions for the product engineer. Because again, like this is what we talked about last time as well. There's this Dex CDK, which gives you the ability to build a strict types, like strongly typed schema YAML interface or front end, which Pulumi also has, which is like
No, it
Pulumi
reminds me of the serverless
YAML.
application framework.
Yes, like SAML.
SAML?
Not SAML, sorry, SAM.
Oh, yeah, serverless application. What does the N stand
I've been
for?
doing too much authorization and authentication lately.
Model. Shit.
Yeah. But this is a bit funny, right? Because it kind of like gives you the L2 construct or the L2 or L3 construct as a YAML composition thing. And
I
I feel
actually I love it. I love it. It works for me like 9 out of 10 times.
And I think that's kind of the experience that we can build on top of Terra constructs or CDKTF. It's basically a front end question, right? Under the hood, uh, like Dockerfile is a front end. They completely reworked Docker as well. Like Dockerfile is not the standard. Like you can have different front ends. You can have a YAML front end. You can have another front end, because now you're building actual proper programming objects that can, bind themselves and evolve and can be configured differently. You're not stuck with static Terraform modules that you then have to put a whole bunch of Go templating around, because you're giving your engineers a YAML interface to basically configure modules under the hood. That's what I hear banks do, right? And it's the same with Kubernetes. That's exactly what Helm is. You're just putting Go templating around a bunch of YAML, which is Kubernetes resource definitions or manifests, right? And we see where that goes. We see a Helm chart with like a values.yaml where you have no idea how that gets, interpolated by the Go templates under the hood. The Go templates are extremely complicated with like
Well,
too much logic within
that
the
that's
template engine.
that's why I showed you that Terraform project that I was cooking up the other day because I use Pickle and when you run it through Pickle, you can see the Pickle schema, you can see your Pickle, you can see how it becomes Terraform JSON.
But why do I have to learn a new language when TypeScript is already a TypeScript compiler that gives me strong typing and capabilities like Pickle, except I don't have to learn Pickle and I can just
Well,
run TypeScript.
well, the thing that I like about it is that it's clear to me what what is the entry point into Terraform when I'm writing in Pickle. It's clear as day. But if you're writing CDK and using Terra constructs, then you really don't know what the Terraform resources are going to look like until they're
No,
generated, I
that's not the same
suppose.
thing as what you just started the sentence with. You said you know the entry point, and then you say you don't know what's gonna look like. That is a very different. I know the entry point. When I use CDK, I know exactly how this is going to get invoked, because I have a strongly typed interface now that is defined under TypeScript, and TypeScript compiles to JSON schema. So I can expose that typed interface with a JSON schema on top of a YAML file, and then my engineers can write YAML. Except they get an error message if they don't put the field in the right place, or if they have a typo, or if they misplace a space. Maybe you get the same with Pickle because you get a strongly typed
Yeah.
pickle file or pickle config, but you get exactly the same with TypeScript. You can expose it as a JSON schema, and you can allow people to provide config files, and you can control the entry points.
Okay,
100%.
okay. I might have misspoke here, but what I'm trying to say is that the translation is more is more straightforward in my mind because
But then you're not dealing with complicated Terraform configurations. Your problem, I need to know exactly what is the Terraform configuration you
yeah,
need
I
to
mean
handle. Because if you look at the
in my repo,
generated,
I'm just mapping it into a module, and you're right. When you in your example, when you're messing around with API gateway or
which
Lambda,
is a realistic cloud, because you just use a
which
cloud
is
workloads, because
yeah,
is
you're
what you
right.
just said. This is what we all use, and
Okay,
Terraform
okay,
modules are horrible at it. And then you're gonna have to write
you're right.
Pickle to wrap the horrible Terraform experience, which is
Mm,
very limited because it only has like 40 different variable inputs. The outputs are not even typed. You can write Pickle again to do that. But how about we go back to the source? How
yeah,
about we build a proper L2 construct, and then they know how to bind each other? And this example here, these 230 lines of Terraform, is not to tell you like this is what you're gonna work with. This is to show you the complexity and the
yeah,
ugliness
yeah,
of
yeah,
what's
yeah,
under the
yeah,
hood. This is what you write.
yeah. I
And
mean,
this is a well-known pattern because this is actually the AWS CDK pattern. This is
mm,
literally the CDK workshop example,
yeah, yeah.
except it's on my landing page and now it spits out Terraform.
I think it definitely makes sense to empower product teams. But I keep on going back to the thought that in a heavy regulated company, you would have to just give them a very locked down.
Yeah, and that's where a platform team would need to build using these constructs instead of these modules, actually with a proper programming language.
Okay. Okay.
They would
Now,
be able to build what they need.
okay, so the platform team uses Terra constructs to create the golden paths.
For example, yes, like the pattern here that I showed on the other slide, uh, which was I'm allowing my teams to deploy onto Fargate, and we use an application load balancer. In our case, the application load balancer is part of the landing zone, so they must import it using from application load balancer attributes. Maybe I can wrap all of that up as my sample app, TypeScript interface. So you must provide the necessary attributes to import the load balancer, the VPC, and the cluster. And this is a strongly typed interface of
Mm.
what are my
So,
integration points.
okay. And then how complete is Terra Constructs? Do you support like everything CDK throws at it, or is it like
No, no,
some
no. So I started with like every single AWS module that is in AWS CDK and more moving it over into on top of Terraform, and that's been very manual. Then I also used LLMs to automate that process, but I still need to write all of the unit tests. I need to write all of the integration tests. I need to validate
okay. So you're
everything,
just getting started sort of thing. I mean,
like a year getting started. So at this point, I'm focused on building the features that I need at my organization, right? What I
oh,
want,
that's a great slide deck actually. I really like that.
yeah, what I want at this point, if people are interested, they should reach out and they say like, great, we use Fargate a lot. I don't see Fargate right now. Like this pattern that I show here, it's a little asterisk at the bottom there, pending the ECS pattern module public release. So this is not in TerraConstruct integrated yet. I need to make that public.
Just very
But
quickly, why Fargate instead of serverless? It's just they need it to be
we
persistently
use
running.
a lot of serverless at my organization. And at some point, there's long-running job like services that you
Okay,
need
okay.
to
Long run
run,
job.
and
Okay.
better to
And
run them in containers
end of
without the
conversation.
whole Kubernetes complexity. So we use
Nice.
Terraform a lot.
I'm with
Yeah,
you. I'm with you. Ugh, Kubernetes
it's
is such a nightmare.
so it's very funny because when we met, I was running the Docker and Kubernetes meetups, and you would tell me like, why don't you just use Compose? It's so much simpler. And I would be like, Compose doesn't have all the dials and knobs that you need, and Kubernetes is like properly designed.
When
And
was
then
this?
ECS came out.
This must have been years ago.
Yeah, 2017 maybe. Yeah.
Well, oh, well, that's back when what was that? Core OS. I love Core OS. Don't know what happened
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it.
They were acquired by IBM. Now there's
Oh,
a
and they're
ported
dead.
as Flatcar Linux. It was fully
Oh,
integrated. No, they were acquired by Red Hat, and Red Hat was acquired by IBM, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So CoreOS was acquired by Red Hat. All of the CoreOS projects, such as Tectonic, were integrated within OpenShift, and then they replaced like the CentOS or whatever the Red Hat container Linux became, was rebranded CoreOS really. So all of the CoreOS like systemd integrations, which ultimately systemd is a Red Hat project as well, right? CoreOS was 100% built on top of
True.
systemd. So then some of the original CoreOS people that were not part of the acquisition, or some people involved with the project, created Flatcar Linux. I don't know where that went, but today Talos is super interesting because they're taking this whole like exposing the Linux administration surface completely through the API, which was another OS also had this idea. I don't know if it was Talos, but there was another one doing the same thing.
Not too
And
sure what Talos is. Sounds like a security product.
Talos.
But anyway, to defend my you know what it is? Yeah, I think I know what it is. Yeah,
Yeah, they just have a new landing page, sorry.
Sudera.
They
But
expose
going
all of
back
the
to my
API.
going back, I don't remember talking to you about Docker Compose, but I think actually Docker Compose is one of those technologies that I still regularly use and love.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's just when Docker tried to take it and replace it with Swarm, right? They
Oh,
like
oh shit, that was a shit show.
no nobody liked Swarm. Um, so yeah,
It's
Docker
a
fought a long
yeah.
time with it
Okay.
with
Okay, I think we need to somehow end this
rep.
because but
Getting
I
tired,
really
running out of time.
I did really enjoy this. I think we covered a lot of things. I think
It's-
I,
Maybe
I'm in
one
the
more
right
thing.
headspace. Okay, one more thing.